The colonel's coffee cup never hit the floor. It hovered in his fingers as if time had paused. The lounge went quiet enough to hear ice settle in a glass. The attendant still blocked my way, chin up at my jeans and scuffed sneakers. Then the colonel said it barely above a breath, and the air shifted around his words. "Ma'am, the Black Widow of Seal." I didn't answer. In rooms like that, silence is a proper uniform. 30 minutes earlier, I was just another traveler at Dulles, pushing a carry-on whose wheel had surrendered somewhere between Bahrain and Boston. The sign above the doorway read, "Active Duty Authorized Access Only." The kid at the desk saw denim and decided civilian. "Ma'am, this section's for active duty only. Polite enough, it's the tiny cuts that sting." I slid my ID across the counter. He didn't pick it up. "Good thing I still am," I said. "Really, what branch?" "Navy Fleet Operations." He blinked as if the words were English, but the meaning wasn't. Maybe he pictured paperwork. Maybe he pictured me shelving forms while the real work happened somewhere salty and loud. He opened his mouth to continue when the colonel turned. He wasn't loud about it. He just rotated in his chair, set the cup down without looking, and studied me the way you study a horizon about to change weather. Gray jacket over a faded unit t-shirt, West Point ring sunk into a knuckle that had been broken twice. He knew. You can tell when somebody knows because they stand inside the silence with you. "Ma'am, the Black Widow of Seal." His voice didn't travel far. It didn't have to. The kid at the desk glanced between us, trying to measure something he couldn't see. I could have cut the tension with a joke. I could have pulled rank I haven't said out loud in years. Instead, I let the moment breathe. Old chiefs taught me if the sea is telling a story, don't talk over it. "Used to be," I said finally. Not a boast, not a confession, just a fact in plain clothes. A woman 2 seats over lifted her chin. The ball cap read, "Korea Veteran." Across from her, a paperback rested against a sleeve that ended above an elbow that wasn't there. The lounge wasn't a place anymore. It was a memory you could walk into people who'd carried heavy things, letting them down without dropping them. The attendant swallowed. I didn't mean... "It's all right," I told him. "You asked the right question." He looked confused, so I added, "Which branch matters more than anything printed on a jacket?" He cleared his throat, found my ID, and finally looked. His shoulders loosened. He swiped the card. The door clicked. "Welcome in," he said, and this time he meant it. The colonel didn't smile. He nodded once approval apology, and "I know what you've seen all at once." He gestured toward an empty chair, and I took it. "Long flight?" he asked. "Long enough," I said. "Home's farther than miles." He looked at my carry-on. "Lose a wheel or win a fight?" "Both," I said, and we let the line sit until it earned a grin. He didn't ask what fleet operations meant. He didn't have to. People from his generation know titles are small boxes around large responsibilities. Ships don't move because of speeches. They move because somebody keeps the math steady while the weather lies. "Heading home," he said. "Maine," I answered. "Dad runs a fishing charter. He had a heart scare. I figured I'd show up instead of call." Good man. The best kind. Taught me to tie knots with my eyes closed. "Then you'll be all right," he said. He didn't mean the flight. Homeward miles are heavier. I could feel the weight of conversations I'd postponed because other lives were burning brighter. On a carrier deck, everything's loud and immediate. Back home, it's the quiet that gets you. 2 new arrivals read the sign, rolled their eyes, and went quiet when they noticed the wheelchair and the missing sleeve. The old Marine in the corner lifted his paper cup like a small toast, then set it down. I took out my phone and stared at the text I kept not opening. My brother Mark had sent a photo of Dad's old patrol boat tied at a different dock. The caption, "Had to sell. Will explain. Midnight timestamp." I could hear the argument. Waiting starts with words, ends with echoes. I put the phone face down. "You'll handle it," the colonel said, the way a man tells you weather will pass. "How do you know?" "Because you didn't answer me in the first minute," he said. "You let the room catch up to the truth. People who need to be right talk fast. People who plan to do right take their time." I wanted to say a lot. Instead I asked, "What's your gait?" "Same as yours," he said, and a small mercy slipped into the day. The attendant returned with a bottle of water and set it by my elbow like a truce offering. "Thank you for your service," he said. It wasn't the canned version. It landed like something he'd decided for himself. "Thank you for learning," I said. Boarding began. When my name came over the speaker, the attendant stood eyes up. "Ma'am," he said, and there was a lesson in the single word. Not the swipe of the card, not the click of the door, respect. I nodded, took the one-wheeled case, and rose. As I passed the colonel, he half stood from reflex. I pressed his shoulder. "Save your knees," I said. "Save your heart," he answered. Outside the terminal, noise returned: children negotiating pretzels, a TSA bin rattling, a country song leaking from someone's earbuds. I let the current carry me toward the gate, thinking about the kid at the desk, the woman with the Korea cap, the man with the missing elbow, and the way a sentence softly said, "can level a room." The gate agent scanned my pass. "Enjoy your flight, Commander." "Thank you," I said. "I intend to." They called me Black Widow because I survived a mission no one was meant to survive. I didn't choose the name, and I didn't fight it. The Navy has a way of naming things after the silence that follows them. I was 26 when the orders came: Operation Cold Current Arabian Sea. My call sign was Halo 2. I was serving as Fleet Operations Liaison for a SEAL extraction unit. Our job was to coordinate the waterline approach for a captured recon team. The night was black glass and static. Every move had to be exact. Ryan was my co-pilot and fiancé, call sign Falcon. He had that kind of grin that cut through static. When the mission went wrong, and it always does at some point, he told me, "If we make it home, I'm building a porch before you build another excuse to leave." I smiled, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. The explosion took half the helicopter and all of him. The fuel burned blue, not red, odd detail I'll never forget. The SEALs made it out because he pulled the bird to starboard. I woke up half submerged, listening to the sea hiss through torn metal. They gave me a medal, a new title, and a silence that's never really left. Back in the States, my mother couldn't look at the uniform without seeing the ring that never made it home. My father asked once, "Was it worth it?" I told him yes. He didn't ask again. That's how fathers and daughters in uniform talk once honestly, and then they move on before words break something else. I stayed in. Promotions came faster than peace of mind. They made me operations commander for the Fleet Strike Liaison teams, meaning I coordinated surface ships, submarines, and SEAL task units for integrated missions. Most days it felt like solving storms. People assume revenge in the military means fire and fury. Sometimes it's paperwork done right so a man's widow gets her benefits before Christmas. Sometimes it's walking into a hearing and saying, "No sir, they followed orders." My kind of revenge came from fixing what chaos tried to ruin. Every time I signed off a mission file, I thought about Ryan's handwriting on the flight log. I could see the small curve of his R's, calm, steady. I kept one page in my locker until the ink bled from salt and years. The nickname Black Widow stuck after a reporter at Norfolk caught wind of the mission's casualty list. The widow who brought the team home, the headline read, "The Navy hated it. I hated it more. You can't bury a man and live under his name at the same time." Still inside the community, it turned into a quiet kind of respect. SEALs are superstitious. They think some people carry luck heavier than armor. Mine was duty, not luck, but they saluted it anyway. Years passed. New deployments, same horizon. I kept flying, kept coordinating, kept pretending the sky still sounded the same. Then one morning, standing on the deck of a carrier off Guam, I realized I hadn't heard the ocean in years. Just the noise of command. That's when I asked for reassignment. Fleet Operations offered me a desk. I took it, half grateful, half guilty. My work shifted to coastal logistics monitoring, East Coast response protocols, disaster coordination, sometimes rescue training for small-town sheriffs who didn't trust Navy input until they saw what precision looked like. That's how I started hearing my hometown's name again. Rockport, Maine. Storm paths, tide projections, small port reports. The town where I grew up, where Dad ran a charter boat called Hale's Tide, and where Mark, my younger brother, still blamed me for missing every Thanksgiving since 2008. Last spring I found a voicemail from him: "Dad's getting tired. He won't say it, but he is. Maybe come home while it still means something." I replayed it more times than I'd admit. Then I booked leave. That's how I ended up in jeans at an airport carrying one broken wheel and a promise overdue. The colonel from the lounge wasn't the first man to recognize me. Once at a diner near Coronado, a retired chief slid my check away and said, "You still owe the sea a drink." I nodded and left 2 quarters on the counter, Navy tradition. Recognition never feels comfortable. It's a mirror you didn't ask for, showing you a life you lived in fragments. That night, after the airport, sitting by the hotel window overlooking the runways, I watched planes lift off and vanish into cloud layers. I tried to imagine what Ryan would say if he saw me now, hair streaked with gray uniform, folded in a garment bag, still chasing unfinished conversations. Maybe he'd laugh, maybe he'd tell me I did all right. I opened my phone and scrolled past Mark's new message, "Boat's been acting up. Dad won't stop pushing himself. Just come home, Lauren." The word home hit harder than any explosion ever had. I booked the first flight to Portland, packed what little fit, and told myself I was ready. The Navy had taught me how to manage crises, but not how to arrive quietly. The next morning, as the plane leveled over the Atlantic, the steward's voice broke through the hum. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent into Maine." Descent, fitting word. I looked out at the endless blue and thought maybe the only way to make peace with the past is to stop flying above it. Rockport hadn't changed much in 10 years, just the faces that had grown older waiting for me. The harbor still smelled like diesel and low tide, lobster traps still stacked like crooked teeth along the dock, and the same flag still clung to the same bent pole outside Hale's Tide Charters, my father's business, his pride, his whole world. When the taxi stopped, I told the driver I'd walk the last block. It felt right to arrive on foot. My boots crunched over salt, stiff gravel. The wind off the water was sharp enough to taste. Through the fogged window of the boathouse, I saw my father, gray hair, now shoulders, smaller breath heavy, but still inspecting every rope like it owed him something. He didn't see me at first. My brother Mark did. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, the same impatient frown he'd had since we were kids. He looked like Dad used to, broad shoulders, sunburned neck, but without the patience behind it. "Well, look who blew in with the tide," he said. "Fleet operations in the flesh." "Hi, Mark." He didn't move. "We were starting to think the Navy lost you." "Not yet," I said, forcing a small smile. "How's Dad?" "Same as before you left," he said. "Stubborn, tired, won't stop working." Dad turned then. His eyes found me and softened before he caught himself. "Lauren." I dropped my duffel and hugged him. He smelled like salt and engine grease, same as always. His ribs felt smaller under my arms. "Still keeping the old girl afloat," I said, nodding toward the boat. "She's got more rust than wood these days, but she floats. That's something." Mark grunted. "Barely. Costs more to fix her than to scrap her." Dad shot him a look. "You don't scrap a boat that's been through more storms than you have birthdays." I laughed softly, and for a second it felt like we were 3 people who still understood each other. Then it passed. Inside, the radio played a country station that couldn't quite hold a signal. The coffee pot hissed, long past empty. Photos lined the wall, fishing trips, Navy graduations, one picture of Mom before the chemo took her smile. Dad motioned for me to sit. "You eating?" "I can wait." "Then you'll wait too long." He poured chowder into a chipped bowl and slid it across the counter. His hands trembled slightly. Mark watched silent until the spoon clinked. "You here for good or just passing through again?" "On leave," I said. "Figured I'd help out while Dad's recovering." He snorted. "Help out? What, gonna run the charter boats between drone strikes?" "Mark," Dad warned. "It's fine," I said. "I can handle sarcasm better than storms." He leaned closer. "You always could. That's the problem. You handle everything except being here." The words hit harder than I let show. I took another spoonful, tasted more salt than chowder. Dad broke the silence. "Mark's been keeping the business running, mostly." "Mostly?" I asked. He sighed. "Bookings are down, engine repairs up. We had to sell the small skiff last spring." Mark shrugged. "You were busy flying jets, remember?" "Coordinating ships," I corrected quietly. "Same difference to people who pay bills." I set down the spoon. "I sent money, Mark." "Yeah, and you sent medals too. Dad keeps them in a drawer under the tax receipts." "Enough," Dad said sharply. "This house has seen enough fighting for a lifetime." No one spoke for a while. The radio static filled the cracks. Later, I followed Dad outside. The air carried the sweet rot of low tide. He sat on a crate, breathing slow. "I didn't raise you two to keep score," he said. "I know," I whispered. "He's angry because you remind him what he didn't become. He loves you anyway." "I'm not sure he remembers how." Dad chuckled softly. "Neither did I after your mother died. Sometimes loving looks like yelling from the wrong direction." We watched the gulls fight over scraps. The wind picked up colder now. "He said you'll find your way back, Lauren. Just don't expect it to be quick." "I never did." He smiled. "That's why I trust you to steer when it gets ugly." That night I slept in my old room above the shop. The walls still held the faint outline where my Navy poster used to hang. The window faced the harbor, same as before. Outside I could hear the creak of moorings, the slow rhythm of boats brushing the dock. Somewhere below, Mark moved around, closing up. The floorboards carried his weight, same heavy steps, same resentment. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the colonel from the airport, about the way his voice softened when he said my name. Respect used to feel like armor. Now it just reminded me how thin it can get. Before sleep came, I texted Mark a simple line, "Thanks for holding things together." No reply, just the hum of the sea against the shore, steady as memory. In the morning I found a note taped to the coffee pot. "Boat inspection at 9. If you're still in town, maybe you can explain why the Coast Guard thinks we're behind on paperwork." I smiled despite myself. Revenge, I thought, doesn't always start with anger. Sometimes it starts with a clipboard. By Saturday morning, word had spread that I was back in Rockport. Small towns don't need phone trees, they've got coffee counters and gossip currents stronger than the tide. At the diner near the harbor, a waitress named Jean still ran the morning shift. She froze when she saw me. "Lauren Hale. Lord, you look just like your mama if your mama could glare a storm into behaving." "Good to see you too, Jean. Your dad's still chasing lobsters and pretending he's 30. Still winning half the time." She laughed, poured me coffee, then leaned closer. "He brags about you, you know. But folks around here stopped listening after the papers called you Black Widow. They don't understand it." "Neither did I said. She set down the pot. "Don't let 'em forget. People need reminding what service looks like." Outside, gulls wheeled over the harbor like gossip with feathers. Mark was loading gear onto the charter boat with two local kids, Ben and Tyler, fresh out of high school. Both wore Red Sox caps, and the easy arrogance of boys who haven't learned yet that the ocean keeps its own score. "Morning," I said. Ben smirked. "You Navy right, guess that means paperwork and coffee runs." Tyler elbowed him. "Dude, that's Marines. Navy just gives them rides." Mark shot them a look but didn't stop them. Maybe he wanted me to hear it. Maybe he wanted them to. I walked over, steady. "You ever been on deck during a storm, Ben?" He shrugged. "Just lobster season, nothing crazy." "Then you've never been Navy." Mark's jaw tightened. "She's just visiting boys, don't worry." "Visiting," I repeated softly. "Yeah, that's what I do." The inspection officer from the Coast Guard arrived just as the air turned sharp with sea spray. She looked about 30, polite but brisk. "I'm Lieutenant Ortiz. Here about the overdue compliance forms and maintenance log." Mark muttered paperwork again. I took the clipboard. "I'll handle it." Ortiz eyed me. "You have experience with maritime protocols." "Fleet Operations, U.S. Navy," I said. Her posture changed instantly. "Ma'am." Mark rolled his eyes. "Here we go." "Relax," I told him. "It's not rank, it's familiarity. We speak the same language." Within an hour, I had the logs squared. Signatures need inspection passed. Ortiz shook my hand before leaving. "Pleasure working with you, Commander Hale." Mark waited until she left. "You always have to make it look easy." "It's not," I said. "It's practiced." He didn't answer. That afternoon, Dad insisted we all go to the Veterans Day cookout at the town green. Old Man Peterson's grilling. Be rude not to show. Mark grumbled but went. The park was full of folding chairs and the smell of charcoal. Flags lined the fence. Kids chased each other between picnic tables. For a moment I thought maybe the town hadn't changed as much as I feared. Then I caught the glances, quick, assessing, curious. Not hostile, just uncertain. Like they were trying to match headlines to faces. A man near the food line said quietly to another, "That her the Black Widow thing." "Yeah, thought she quit after that crash." I pretended not to hear, but Dad didn't. his shoulders squared old pride flickering through tired bones. A teenager handing out paper plates laughed to his friend. "Guess the Navy's got influencers now." Before I could speak, an elderly Marine in a faded cover cap stepped forward. "Watch your mouth, son." The kid blinked. "Sir." The old Marine pointed his fork at me. "You see that woman? She ran operations that pulled men out of hell. You hand her a plate like you'd hand a flag." The park went quiet. The boy swallowed hard and offered the plate with both hands. "Thank you," I said gently. "And thank him too. That's how it works." Applause started in one corner, small at first, then rolling through the crowd. Dad looked away, blinking too much. Mark stood still, hands in pockets, expression unreadable. Afterward, a few people came to shake my hand. Some apologized for believing old rumors. Most just said, "Welcome home." When the sun started dropping, Dad insisted on leaving early. On the walk back, Mark lagged behind silent. Finally, he said, "You liked that, didn't you? The salute, the applause, makes up for missing Mom's funeral." I stopped walking. The streetlights hadn't come on yet, so his face was half shadow, half regret. "That's not fair," I said quietly. Neither was growing up with an empty seat at every table. I let the words hang there because arguing would only harden them. He walked ahead. Back home, Dad sat at the kitchen table tired. "He doesn't mean it," he said. "Yes, he does," I replied, "but he'll mean something else tomorrow." Dad smiled sadly. "That's family. The tide always turns." Later, as I cleaned the dishes, I thought about the applause, the way it felt like closure and guilt at the same time. Recognition isn't always a reward. Sometimes it's just proof that people finally see what you never stopped being. I looked out the window at the dark water. Boats swayed like breathing things. Somewhere out there was the line between duty and forgiveness. I just hadn't found it yet. I woke before dawn to the smell of diesel and the sound of a wrench slipping on metal. The air inside the boathouse was cold enough to see my breath. Mark was already there, bent over the old patrol boat Dad had named Eleanor after Mom. He didn't look up when I came in. "You ever sleep?" I asked. "Not when I've got debt breathing down my neck." I stepped closer. Debt. He exhaled, rubbed his forehead with the back of a grease-streaked hand. "Charter business hasn't paid in months. The fuel costs alone." "You should have told me." "Why? So you could fix it from 1,000 miles away?" He stood, tossing the wrench onto the bench. "You always swoop in with rank and solutions. Doesn't work like that here." "Then tell me how it works." He glared at me, jaw tight. "It works like real people trying to stay afloat while the Navy turns heroes into headlines." "You're famous, Lauren. Around here, fame doesn't fill gas tanks." I didn't answer. He wasn't entirely wrong. Later that day, Dad called us both into the office. "You two need to talk about the boat," he said. "Mark wants to sell it." My heart sank. "You're kidding." "It's just a hunk of wood," Mark said. "Could cover the winter bills." "That boat was Mom's last wish," I said quietly. "You remember what she said before she passed?" He shrugged. "She said keep it in the family." "I am. I'll sell it under our name." Dad slammed his palm against the desk. "Enough, this boat's carried this family longer than either of you." The anger in his voice cracked into a cough that bent him forward. I rushed to his side, steadying him until it passed. When he waved me off, I saw the fear he tried to hide behind stubbornness. Mark turned away. "We'll talk later." But later never came. By the following morning, Eleanor was gone. I stood at the dock staring at the empty slip the ropes cut clean. A slip receipt from Camden Marine Sales was nailed to the post. The ink was still wet. Dad came out, saw the space, and went pale. He didn't. "He did," I said. He sank onto a crate. "That boat was your mother's heart." "I'll get it back." "How?" "The same way we got through every mission," I said. "By finding the trail." Camden Marine sat 20 miles south, a low building with a gravel lot and a dozen boats waiting for new names. Inside, a man with a ball cap and a coffee cup looked up from paperwork. "You the buyer?" he asked. "No," I said, flashing my ID, "the sister." He hesitated. "We bought it fair. Kid said he had authority." "I'm not questioning the sale. I just need to know where it went." He squinted at the clipboard. "Private collector." Didn't leave a full name, just initials EJ. "Can you give me a number?" He shook his head. "Privacy law." I slid a photo across the counter, a younger me in uniform beside the same boat, Mom smiling on the dock behind us. "She's not a collector's item," I said. Something in his face shifted. "You're that Hale." "Depends what you read." He nodded slowly. "Boat's still in the yard. Papers haven't cleared yet. Tell you what, come back tomorrow. I'll hold it. No promises." I thanked him, left, and sat in my truck until the ache behind my ribs eased. Anger would have been easier. But anger's loud. Revenge works best when quiet. That night I called in an old favor. "Fleet Operations Command, Boston District," said a familiar voice. "Commander Hale," I said, "need a check on a registration transfer, Eleanor 32-foot patrol model, Camden lot." "Still running rescues, huh?" the voice teased. "Something like that." Next morning when I pulled up to Camden Marine, the dealer was waiting. "Got a message from the Coast Guard," he said. "Said there's a hold on all transfers involving the Hale vessel. Paperwork glitch, maybe. Boat's yours till they clear it." I smiled. Appreciate the help. Back at the dock, Eleanor looked tired but proud. I ran my hand along her side, the paint blistered but sturdy. "You're home," I whispered. Mark showed up an hour later, furious. "What did you do?" "I did what you should have," I said. "Protected what matters." "You had no right." "I had every right," I said quietly. "You don't sell legacy for rent money. You fix what's broken." He shook his head. "You always think you're saving people. Maybe you just like control." I stepped closer. "You're right, I do like control, because the alternative is chaos, and I've buried too many people in chaos." For a moment his face softened. Then pride took over again. "You think that boat's your revenge? Fine, enjoy it." "It's not revenge," I said, "it's rescue." I hired 2 local vets, Ben's father, a former Coast Guard chief, and an old SEAL diver named Harris to help restore Eleanor. We replaced the engine, polished the hull, painted the name back on in white script. When we launched her again, half the town came to watch. Even the mayor showed up, curious about that Navy woman turning a relic into a rescue boat. I didn't make speeches. I just handed the keys to Harris and said, "First mission's yours. Flood season's coming." That night, news spread fast. Retired commander turns family boat into coastal rescue unit. By dawn, the phone at the shop wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. I declined them all. I wasn't doing it for headlines. At breakfast, Dad smiled for the first time in weeks. "Your mother would have liked that." Mark didn't join us. He'd left a note, "Don't wait up." I looked at his handwriting, angry, rushed, familiar. Then I folded it once and slid it into my jacket. Forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. But sometimes you start by giving it before it's asked for. 2 weeks later, winter came early. The ocean stiffened with wind that carried salt like knives, and the sky turned pewter by noon. Eleanor, our patched-up rescue boat, had already saved 2 stranded fishermen off Vinyl Haven, and people in town started talking again, only this time the talk was soft, respectful. Dad's health was holding steady, though he tired faster. He sat at the dock most days, wrapped in a navy blanket, watching Eleanor bob like a heartbeat he'd given back to the world. Sometimes I'd catch him wiping his eyes, pretending it was the wind. Mark hadn't come around since the argument. He left the business books on the counter and vanished somewhere between pride and shame. Every morning I hoped he'd walk in. Every night I convinced myself he would tomorrow. Then one gray afternoon I heard my name shouted across the pier. "Commander Hale." I turned. The same colonel from the airport was stepping off a black SUV dress coat buttoned high against the cold. Behind him, 2 younger officers carried a folder and a velvet box. "Sir," I said. He smiled. "Didn't expect to find you in flannel, ma'am. Mind if I intrude?" Dad pushed himself up, saluting out of habit. The colonel waved it off gently. "I came on behalf of the Navy's Eastern Fleet Command," he said. "The department recently reviewed commendations related to Operation Cold Current." My throat went dry. That was years ago. "Too many," he said. "You were never officially recognized for coordination under fire. The board decided to fix that." He nodded to the officer beside him who opened the box. Inside, beneath the ribbon and silver sheen, rested the Navy Commendation Medal. Dad gasped softly. "Lord above!" I stared at it. "I don't need—" The colonel cut me off. "You don't, but we do. The younger ones need to know who got them home." He pinned the medal just above my jacket pocket over a stain I'd never managed to scrub out. For a moment the dock was silent, except for the slap of water against wood. When he stepped back, I saw Mark standing at the edge of the crowd, hands shoved in his pockets, face unreadable. Our eyes met, and for the first time in years, he didn't look away. The colonel nodded toward him. Family. Complicated, I said. He smiled. Most worth keeping is. Then he turned to Dad. Your daughter's reputation preceded her, sir. Some of my men still tell the story of the widow who brought them home. Dad's voice cracked. That's my girl. The colonel saluted sharp and slow. I returned it, my fingers trembling in the cold. Then he left as quietly as he'd come, leaving behind a hush that felt heavier than applause. That night I found Mark sitting by the boat hood, up staring at the reflection of Eleanor in the dark water. Didn't think you'd show, I said. Didn't think I should, he replied. Figured you'd earn some peace without me ruining it. I sat beside him close enough to feel the cold off his jacket. You didn't ruin anything. He laughed softly. I sold the boat. You made a mistake. You fixed plenty before that. He shook his head. I didn't fix this. You did. You always do. I just had more practice cleaning up messes. We watched the ripples bend the reflection of the hull. The harbor lights blinked like slow breathing. He said, when that metal showed up, people started talking again. The diner crowd, the church folks. I saw the paper local commander restores family legacy. I didn't know they'd use a picture of you with Dad. He looks proud. He is, I said. You should let him see you again before that pride turns to regret. Mark's jaw tightened, then loosened. I thought you left because you didn't care. But seeing what you've done here, I think maybe you left because you cared too much. I smiled. That's closer to the truth. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small brass nameplate, tarnished but legible. Eleanor, H. Family Docs. I found this in the old storage box, he said. Figured you'd want it. I think Mom would rather you put it back on the boat, I said. He looked up, eyes wet. Together. Together. We walked to Eleanor, tools in hand. The night was silent except for the sea against the pier, and Dad humming a tune from the porch one Mom used to sing when storms rolled in. When the last screw tightened, Mark stepped back, exhaled, and said, She's home again. Yeah, I said quietly, so are we. Next morning, as sunlight broke across the harbor, the local news van arrived. I tried to wave them off, but they wanted a statement. Commander Hale, what made you turn your family's old patrol boat into a rescue craft? I glanced at Mark, then at Dad, watching from the doorway, coffee steaming in his hands. Because service doesn't stop when the uniform comes off, I said. It just changes shape. The reporter nodded, caught off guard by the simplicity. That evening, I scrolled through the local news page. The headline read, Black Widow brings her town home again. Underneath a photo of Dad, Mark, and me standing on the dock, wind in our faces, the boat behind us. I turned off the screen and sat outside. The harbor was quiet. Somewhere a gull cried out over the water, and the sound folded into the calm. I thought of Ryan, his laugh, his promise of a porch, his hand disappearing into the blue. Maybe this was the porch he meant, a place where the storms finally break and the sea forgives. The morning after the news broke, Rockport felt different. Not louder, just gentler. People met your eyes again. Jean at the diner added extra cream to my coffee on the house. Even Ben and Tyler, the kids who'd once mocked my paperwork, waved when they passed by on their bikes. Dad called it the tide turning. I called it something quieter, remembering. By midweek, the rescue line rang nonstop. Fishermen wanted safety checks. Tourists wanted to volunteer. Harris, our old SEAL diver, laughed while fixing ropes on Eleanor. Guess the Navy's recruiting from Main Street now. That's the idea, I said. Teach them before they forget who keeps them safe. That afternoon, Mark came in wearing the same hoodie from our argument weeks earlier. He carried 2 thermoses of coffee. For you and Dad, he said. Ceasefire, I asked. Truce, he corrected. Ceasefire means no one won. Truce means we both stop pretending to lose. We sat on the dock, sipping coffee that tasted more like forgiveness than caffeine. He nudged me. You ever think about writing it all down? The missions, whatever this was. I've written enough reports to fill a lifetime, I said. Stories like that belong to the people who made it home. He smirked. That's the Navy way of saying no. Maybe I said smiling, or maybe I'm just not done living the ending. That Sunday, the town invited me to speak at the high school's Veterans Day assembly. I wanted to decline, but Dad insisted. They need to hear from someone who's been both brave and wrong, he said. That's what teaches them. The auditorium smelled like gym varnish and teenage nerves. Flags hung from the rafters. I stood behind the podium, hands steady. I wasn't much older than most of you when I joined. I began. Thought courage was about shouting louder than fear. Turns out courage is about standing still long enough to listen to it. They leaned in. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was respect that doesn't have words yet. I told them about teamwork loss, and the quiet kind of revenge that doesn't destroy it rebuilds. I spoke of my mother's boat, my brother's mistakes, and the way anger feels powerful until you realize it's just loneliness with good posture. When I was younger, I said I wanted medals. Later, I wanted silence. Now I just want decency to stay in fashion. A chuckle rippled through the room, but some faces softened, the veterans in the back row most of all. Before I finished, a student asked, "Ma'am, what does service really mean to you now?" I looked at him, barely 17, face half hope, half doubt, and said, "Service means showing up. You don't need a uniform for that, just a reason." The principal wiped at her eyes. Dad sat in the front row, hands folded over his cane, proud as any admiral. Mark leaned against the wall, smiling for once, like it didn't cost him effort. After the assembly, people came to shake my hand. One elderly man pressed a folded newspaper clipping into my palm. It was the story of Ryan's crash from years ago. "My son served with him," he said. "He talked about you. Said you kept calm when everyone else panicked. Said that calm saved their lives." I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than any medal." He nodded. He said you'd say that too. That night I walked the shoreline alone. The harbor lights flickered over the water, gold against black. The air smelled like winter, coming cold, clean, honest. I thought about how revenge had begun with anger years ago, how it had softened into something gentler, truer. Revenge isn't always about payback. Sometimes it's about proving that decency can still win quietly. At the far end of the dock, Eleanor rocked in the tide, her reflection broken into 100 moving pieces. The brass nameplate gleamed where Mark had reattached it. Dad's voice echoed faintly in my memory, "The tide always turns." I knelt, touched the edge of the dock, and whispered, "It finally did, Dad." A gust rolled in, carrying salt and the distant cry of gulls. I could almost hear Ryan's laugh in the wind, the one he used when life tried to scare him and failed. When I stood, the night felt lighter. Not because anything was fixed, but because I'd stopped trying to fix it alone. I took one last look at the boat, the town, the quiet harbor that had once forgotten me and now somehow remembered. Then I said softly, "You don't have to wear a uniform to serve. Just don't forget who wore it for you." If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of someone who served, or someone you once misunderstood, share it. Tell their story. Thank them while they can still hear it. Because honor isn't about medals or headlines. It's about showing up every time the tide turns.